If you look at the timing of the Arvind Kejriwal arrest, it comes on a day when, after years of hearing on electoral bond, you have the Supreme Court striking down electoral bonds as unconstitutional. I've had some really sort of traumatic episodes of driving my daughter to the ER because she's so sick with, a bronchial illness. And I know it's because of the pollution.
People react to what's affecting them today, and we have to find things that are caused by climate change that are affecting people today. Hello, and welcome everyone to the 9th episode of the India Dialogue. We're so grateful that you continue to listen to us. My name is Ruchir. Unfortunately, today Manu couldn't make it, but we're so grateful that Smita, one of our wonderful friends, has joined us. Smita Sharma, besides being visiting faculty at Kautilya School of Public Policy, is an independent journalist well known for her work at Network 18, India Today, and The Tribune. Also, I'm joined by my usual fellow host, Mitali, who is, besides being Director of Journalism at the Reuters Institute, is well known for her time at CNBC. I am the CEO at Distributed Energy and Chair at the School of Policy and Governance. Thank you again, Smita, for stepping in this week. We're doing this because we care about India and want to discuss issues in a way that adds value. We're doing this in the build-up to the 2024 national elections as an experiment. Maybe we continue after, maybe we stop earlier, but we want to help unpack important issues for India in a way without shouting at each other, friendly disagreements or not, without discussing things in slogans. Great, let's get this going. I'll continue the monitoring baton today by opening with our first issue, which effectively happened last night with the major arrest of the Aam Aadmi Party Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal in New Delhi. Actually, Rishi Suri, one of our guests and friends, had predicted this in one of our earlier episodes where he did mention that Arvind Kejriwal arrest was coming, and so it has. This follows an arrest of Kavitha from BRS in Telangana. Effectively, there are allegations of corruption in both, but I'll let Mitali set the tone. Mitali, why don't you introduce what's going on with these two arrests, especially with the arrest of Arvind Kejriwal from the India Alliance?
Thanks, Ruchir. And three actually, because Mr. Soren from Jharkhand, the Jharkhand chief minister, was also arrested. So that's a string of three. You were very discreet about why Manu is missing, but I don't need to be. He's basically not spending time with us and spending time with the IPL instead, and he chose the IPL over us. So we're very heartbroken, but we'll deal with it. I think before we talk about the arrests, Ruchir, it would be good to take a few steps back and just set into context what's happened since our last conversation to now. Because what we have in place now is firm election dates, something we were waiting for a long time. And I'll just take a minute to put that into perspective for people listening or watching. So here's what it looks like. It starts off on the 19th of April and it goes till around the 1st of June. It's 7 phases spread over April and May. Now, in effect, this is the longest election in 72 years that India has seen. It's 44 days. And it's going to be in 7 phases over different parts of the country. For those who may already know this, at the risk of repeating it, this is for the lower house in India, and that's 543 elected seats. So any party or coalition needs a minimum of 272 MPs in order to form the government that runs the country. For a reminder, in the 2019 election, the BJP, led by, of course, Mr. Narendra Modi, won over 300 seats, 303 seats. And this time round, a large part of the party's narrative has been that they're going to win 370 seats and come back to power for a third term, which would be a record in itself. It is a huge election in terms of numbers. It's just shy of 1 billion people. I think compared to 2019 versus now, there's 150 million more people coming in to vote. There's more women, there's more youth. So the mix is getting larger and larger in terms of people coming in to cast their vote. Um, there's a couple of question marks that were raised, when these elections were announced, and I'll go through them quickly before I talk about Arvind Kejriwal. And Smita has actually been reporting on that event, so she'll have a lot of perspective to add. For one, I think it definitely did raise eyebrows. The duration of the elections, 44 days, is extremely long. It's also a little bit ironic that this is the same government that's been pushing for one nation, one election, but evidently that one election is a rather long process. Some of the reasoning behind it from the election commission is the fact that security forces deployment warrant that kind of phase out in terms of dates. But I think that would beg the question, in the last 10 years, does that mean that security has worsened to a point that India needs to have such a long election phase? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it bears, questioning and thinking about. It also is a bit odd because what's happening is that in some states, simultaneously, there will be polls both for the state and for the center. Curiously, Jammu and Kashmir, which should have been part of that list, is not in that list. I think that's the other question that we should ask. Why the delay in polls for Jammu and Kashmir when that state has been waiting to hold elections and we don't seem to have any firm dates? We have indications saying people are asking for a month's gap between central and state elections, but we don't know anything yet. It's also a bit curious the way the phases have been mapped out, Ruchir, and there's differences compared to the last time. And it looks, from someone who would analyze the phase out or the phases of election, that there is a tactical advantage that one can spot here for the BJP. So, just for example, voting in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh happens in the first phase. In 2019, that was not the case. Rajasthan was actually the fourth or fifth phase, but one point of view could be that the government is basically milking the advantage that they have coming off from recent state elections, and the fact that they're on a stronger wicket over there, and that's why they're hitting out with Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh first. Similarly, as I was saying, no elections in J&K, but elections in voting in Odisha will happen. And one indication is that the reason that's been pushed back in terms of the phase that it'll happen in the fourth phase, could be because the BJP was talking to and in alliance talks with the BJT, the ruling state party there. And perhaps they're looking for a little bit of a breather and some space to, just set up that alliance and stitch it up before voting actually happens. So that's the critical one. There's one other, point I wanted to raise, and this is wholly unrelated to elections and unrelated to politics. But because you and I, Richard, have talked about it quite a bit in terms of climate and thinking about, doing the right thing, green wise. I, I was quite struck by the fact that the entire election commission note had not one word about heat. These elections are happening in the hottest months possible across the length and breadth of India. It is quite incredible to me that across these peak summer months, there was nothing by way of, added arrangements or even an acceptance of the fact that this could either affect turnout or it could affect numbers or that there were any measures to mitigate that at all. Nothing. So speaking of heat, that brings us to what happened last night, which was in a surprise but not so surprise move, because there have been indications of that for a long time. The Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal was taken into custody and has been arrested, as you yourself said, Ruchir, on allegations. And I think that's, we're again missing Manu's legal perspective, but I think any layman or laywoman would tell you that bail is the norm, jail is exception, especially when you're talking about allegations. But this crosses off the third opposition party member who has now been arrested. And to my mind, this is quite interesting because here's a man who has won the public mandate two elections in a row for Delhi, which is a bona fide state in itself, but is also the national capital of the country. He holds a certain public support. The Aam Aadmi Party is the only party that actually put up a strong fight in Punjab as well in recent elections. So the party has some stature outside of Delhi as well. I would be interested and curious to see how the public reads this move, which by many is being seen as an outright sort of acknowledgement of the fact that people in opposition will be stamped out, and when required they will be jailed as well. Even as that happened, of course, the all the bank accounts for the main opposition party, the Indian National Congress, were frozen. As they have themselves pointed out, this prevents them from any election related work. This prevents them from any advertising, any travel. Any cost that the party would need to incur, I think, becomes a huge challenge now because of that. But Smita, you were tracking the arrest. You were tracking the protest that happened by Aam Aadmi Party workers outside Mr. Kejriwal's house. How do you, first of all, gauge public mood? And secondly, how do you read it as a development ahead of the elections?
Hi, Mitali. Hi, Ruchir. Good to see the friendly, familiar faces. And, before I come and talk about Arvind Kejriwal, because you set the context on elections, and also just to clarify, I'm not in Delhi. I'm actually in Hyderabad. My classes are on in Kautilya School of Public Policy, where I teach. So I was reporting on the Kejriwal story from Hyderabad. I'll just come to it. But, on the election story, I was actually at the Election Commission of India the day the dates were being announced, and the heat was already too much and unbearable that day. And I'm dreading the fact, because I'll be out on the ground doing ground reporting for different news outlets every day till 4th of June. In 2019, the elections had completed and the results were in place by 14th of May. So I was really hoping that by 16th of May this year, I could have maybe driven down to the mountains somewhere, but that's been spoiled completely. So till 4th of June now, there is no holiday in sight. And you spoke about the phases. I mean, it's definitely 7 phases. Even the chief election commissioner, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, earlier, when Mitali, you may have covered 1 or 2 press conferences of the election commission, when they used to start talking, they would set the context, and we knew that they would always, obviously, in Hindi we say cow some footage, because obviously it is your big day, so they're cowing some footage. But it used to be for 15-20 minutes before you give out the election dates. And the entire press conference context setting was like for 1 hour before he actually started announcing the dates, including his own self-written poetry asking the opposition not to blame EVMs for their own failures. I will not pass any judgment on the quality of the shairi, but it was pure torture waiting for 1 hour to come to the dates. And when the dates were announced, if you look at the phases, I mean, you mentioned there are 4 states: Odisha, Arunachal Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, and Sikkim that will have concurrent polls. Also, there are by-elections to almost 26 assembly seats that are going to be held. If you look at a state like Maharashtra, I mean, if the reason is that we want to send paramilitary forces because the states have, either they're in the Naxal belt, it doesn't apply. Maharashtra is very simple. You've had 2 political parties there, the regional players. The NCP, which has been split thanks to Operation Lotus. You have the Shiv Sena, Uddhav Thackeray faction, which has been split, again led by Eknath Shinde, the other faction. So the sense in Maharashtra is that if Maharashtra is going in for multiple phases, it's not of security concerns. It's simply because the BJP is not sure of the ground mood there, despite these 2 splits and these 2 important factions, despite actually bringing in a Raj Thackeray back into its fold now and joining hands with him. So the more phases you do, essentially it gives them time for the prime minister to go into every nook and corner, to do a rally, to be seen and splashed across all television channels. So honestly speaking, I mean, it's only in this government's case that even in 2019 we saw there was never a tradition of prime ministers flying internationally once the election code of conduct had been announced, model code of conduct had been announced. In 2019, he did that. He went into Bangladesh, where he did a lot of political campaigning around the Matua Muslims. This time he's gone to Bhutan, but he is their star campaigner. This election, in a way, is also a referendum on Mr. Modi for his 3rd term. His achievements, his claims, his personality, his cult is taller than the BJP today. I don't think there should be any doubt in anybody's mind. So they do want to make sure that he is there in every nook, every corner, and where he goes, all television channels will dip into it. And the model code of conduct can, of course, it doesn't apply in a lot of situations. So now this is the election scenario that we are talking about, where things are starting to get very heated up, where you already have an opposition who have been left without funds. The electoral bond story continues to be the biggest story today. And also, just to clarify, Mitali, just today, actually, a short while ago, it has been announced now the BJP is not going in for a tie up with BJD in Odisha. They're going it alone. So, no tie up with Naveen Patnaik and Biju Janata Dal. Now, in this context, when you look at a ruling party that has, जिसे हम हिंदी में कहते हैं साम दाम दंड भेद का concept in going after elections, and there comes a even late evening arrest of one of the most prominent opposition faces today. And while there have been opposition faces who have been arrested, Hemant Soren technically was arrested soon after he stepped down as chief minister. He lost confidence in the assembly, went and submitted his resignation, came back, and very soon we saw him being arrested in a land scam case, which was in early January this year. There have been almost 17, 18 opposition leaders, big and small, who have been arrested, or people who have been arrested also with several people in liquor scam case. In Arvind Kejriwal's case, if you see, Manish Sisodia, the deputy education minister, the deputy chief minister and education minister, has been languishing in jail. Satinder Jain has been in jail. Arvind Kejriwal was summoned 9 times by the enforcement directorate. And just yesterday, actually, the High Court had refused to give him interim protection from arrest. But the High Court didn't say that his accusation had been proven or that he should be arrested. This Manuraj, in the past episodes, has raised the issue of the right for a crime investigating unit to be arresting politicians on the basis of non cooperation. That because you do not cooperate with me, you've been summoned 9 times. Is that an assumption of guilt? And that too, when the election dates have been announced, the model code of conduct is there. Has the Election Commission of India been taken into a loop about a sitting chief minister being arrested when you have elections just a few weeks away? So these are dramatic developments because of the nature of the person that Mr. Arvind Kejriwal is. He is a pan India figure today because he also belongs to, in a way, the Hindi heartland speaking geography. Unlike a Mamata Banerjee, unlike MK Stalin, he doesn't have only a very limited regional or a linguistic or a cultural appeal. He's one of those few opposition leaders today who a larger section of India can actually relate to, whether they like him, hate him, And I'm not wishing away or saying that these corruption charges are not true in the liquor scam case. But it's strange to think that you are talking about allegations of a liquor excise policy which was brought about in 2022 by the Delhi government, which supposedly removed the government, in fact, monopoly and gave due benefits to certain private cartels, that there were kickbacks that were provided into Hyderabad, and all this kickback money was used by Aam Aadmi Party to help fund its elections in Punjab and Delhi. That's essentially the allegations that we are looking at. And I'll just come back to it. I'll throw it back to you. But there are so many questions around these allegations that have been raised right now, and the way in which the nature and the timing of the arrest too, about the health of the democracy that we are talking about today.
And I want to get Ruchir's thoughts in and more from you as well, Smita. But can I ask a larger question, which is that uh, all the opinion polls at this point conducted by television news channels or in sort of conjunction with other agencies have thrown up an emphatic win for the BJP in the general elections. If they were to go to the polls, as you said, this is a mandate for Modi and not for the BJP, or more for Modi and not so much for the BJP. It seems like at this point the BJP is the least confident amongst anyone about its win. I mean, you do this and you thrash around and you try to sort of subjugate the opposition or your competition in places where you feel insecure about where you stand. Should there be insecurity within the BJP, or is this just sort of a ruthless kind of, let's just cut this all to size before we get into elections? Is there, essentially what I'm asking is there a risk here that the kind of strength that people expect to see from BJP in terms of a win could not be as strong as is believed?
I think I just want to say two things. One, it is surprising. I mean, BJP doesn't need these tactics. At least if you were to talk to people on the ground. But here's the flip side, anecdotal, right? Like no polling data. Just the people who I would consider to be ardent supporters of BJP have been quiet in the last couple of days. They've been surprised by the fact that they've been so bold to arrest a sitting chief minister just before they've announced the election. So I do think that this is weighing on people's mind. I think there are many times I come to this podcast trying to be as independent as possible to
And Ruchir, not
look
even
for
before election, actually after announcing election dates.
after announcing. Sorry,
Yeah.
just, you know what I mean. But the thing is, often I come to the podcast thinking about trying to look at the other side here. This one is really suspect. I mean, even if Arvind Kejriwal is guilty of the charges laid, the timing, of course, was designed so that the ninth attempt of trying to get Arvind Kejriwal to cooperate would be after the election dates. So they are very smart people. I mean, they know absolutely what they're doing. One comment I'll make on the polling data, just generally.
Yeah.
I have found historically in India to be polls to not be as accurate, and I find that
Oh,
polls
you mean
often
exit polls? Sorry, not you
uh,
don't, you don't mean
both
polling, you mean exit polls.
both like polls that go before the election and
Yeah.
exit polls. Both of them
Opinion
tend
and
to be
exit polls.
Opinion
to
polls,
be
right?
yeah, opinion polls and exit polls tend to be inaccurate in terms of, because there's a ton of fine tuning that happens around presenting the results to in a way that sort of represents the mood of the media narrative. So I don't believe that it's in the bag as much, although our problem as a system is the lack of a clear opposition. And so I think we all believe it is likely, primarily because if not Modi, if not BJP, then who? And I think that sort of makes the narrative in BJP's favor. That's where I think the mood of the polls is.
You
Smita, you
know,
want to say something? Sorry.
Sorry, no,
yeah,
go ahead.
I think this, if not BJP, who, and I normally don't mince my words. I mean, because having also worked in the Indian television industry now for 20 years plus, and having seen several news channels from the inside, leading news channels in English and Hindi newsrooms. And you are absolutely right. There is a lot of time, more often than not, either the data is flawed, the sample size is flawed, or the interpretation is flawed. So, opinion polls, exit poll data, and especially in today's day and age, when media and television, mainstream media, I'm talking about, not independent YouTubers and stuff, of course they have all their own ideological alignments. Nobody's saying that they're absolutely centrist, but television stations have a very clear alignment today, and they are bending over backwards with this government's agenda. I mean, how much of a coverage did you actually see of? I'm not a Congress spokesperson. I'm not. I'm not a Rahul Gandhi fan to say so. But how much of a Bharat Jodo, this Bharat Nyaya Yatra coverage did we see across mainstream media? How much of the coverage of electoral bonds are we seeing, which is actually the biggest story? And if you look at the timing of the Arvind Kejriwal arrest, it comes on a day when, after years of hearing on electoral bond, you have the Supreme Court striking down electoral bonds as unconstitutional and calling it illegal. And then, after much coercive pressure, the State Bank of India, which keeps dilly-dallying in providing data, in providing information, then it says, "Oh, we will provide, information." When they're asked about the unique registration numbers, they say we'll take time till June. But जब Supreme Court का डंडा चलता है, finally the Supreme Court finds its voice and exerts its pressure. Within a day, you have data provided to you that starts to relate who was selling the bond, who purchased the bond, who encashed the bond. All these dots are connected easily. And on that
Yeah.
very day, when those big numbers start to come in to show which companies really went and donated which electoral bonds to which political parties, in which there is also that revelation of companies who were actually accused in the liquor exercise scam, alleged scam, and then the companies decide to actually buy electoral bonds
Okay.
to the tune of 55 crores donated to the BJP, and they turn approver. So when you have this information coming out as well, then obviously it casts deep aspersions and makes the entire Kejriwal arrest very suspect, politically motivated, the political timing. So there are so many things that are actually leading to these questions at this point in time. I mean, today also, the electoral bond story is what the nation needs to focus on. We have
Yeah.
already had a 2G scam which was based on, and Mitali would be the expert to talk about it, which till date actually looks like it was built on very inflated numbers. There was no evidence eventually that sort of rolled out of that scam. You saw an entire government change. You have the government today going after the Arvind Kejriwal government on the basis of a policy, allegations that this policy caused, had kickbacks of a policy that was scrapped back, where there is no evidence right now, or, at least a court conviction. But in this case, when you have electoral bonds being struck down as unconstitutional, uh, which is a policy that was brought in by the late finance minister Arun Jaitley, which has been nurtured by this government, which has been promoted by this government, and more than 50% of the bond money going into the BJP coffers.
But Ms. Smita, can
Yeah.
I want to, the bond point I want to make, I actually have a question. It's a genuine question.
Yeah.
Don't you think the bond situation, the BJP has an out because the other parties are also culprit? Like you can see Trinamool Congress has received a ton of donations. Congress has received a ton of donations. Even DMK, our colleague, DMK has received. So
Yeah.
aren't there so many guilty parties that it's hard to pin down BJP
I
on
mean,
that?
so then, but Ruchir, the point is exactly that. There's a funny story around this. Smita was making the point about electoral bonds. Indian Express, which is a widely published and read and consumed newspaper, did a full one pager on the electoral bonds. They covered the quantity of the bonds. They covered the amounts. They covered who the largest donor was, and they covered the number two political party that received funds. So they did a piece on the number two political party. It was like, anyone with half a brain would say, okay, that's great, but what about the number one party? So it's really as obvious as that in terms of coverage. On the point that you're making, Ruchir, that's exactly the point. If this is meant to be something that all parties participated in or received the largest from, donors from, then what is there to hide? Why is there so much subterfuge in the court? Why is the chief justice getting to a point where he has to like tick off the council saying, please check yourselves, and he has to almost school the SBI in terms of, this is what I asked you to do, this is what it means, this is what the word forthwith means. It means that I need this now, not in 3 months. So that's the question that the BJP should be answering. If everyone, participated or took benefit from the electoral bonds, then what's to hide over here?
No,
And
there's a
the
there's a
point
very
that
important
Smita
thing
was
to
making,
flag.
sorry, just to finish
Huh.
that,
Yeah, yeah.
Smita, the point that you were making, I think this is, and we keep coming back to this in the India dialogue, which is the subjugation of entire institutions. I wrote a piece about this for the SBI, and I know a lot of people said SBI chairman should now resign. That's not the point. The point is not the chairman. The point is that this is India's largest financial institution where people, I mean, it's the size of a country, the number of people that bank with SBI, where you've essentially subjugated an entire institution. And the same thing with Arvind Kejriwal, who decided to withdraw his bail petition from the Supreme Court. Um, Seeing perhaps the constitution of what the panel that would be looking into his bail petition looked like. I mean, look at the lack of faith in institutions that is now present amongst individuals, politicians, anyone. What is that saying, about who one can turn to for either justice or to do what is morally right? Smita, sorry, you were making a point.
I'll just take a couple of minutes, because often in our bid to try and be objective and fair, we do these comparisons. We say, "Arey, there was always a press censorship. Array, there was an emergency in the country before. But sometimes it's about equating apples and oranges. First of all, I do believe that this is where you need an independent probe, a Supreme Court monitored independent probe to see who are the culprits. Whether it's party X, Y, Z, if there are culprits, go after them. But these criminal investigations of the criminal, the financial crime investigations, at the end of the day, independent news outlets like a Reporters Collective, a News Minute, a Scroll, a News Laundry, they are digging up compilation, a tranche of documents, or the red mic, they're bringing out information, but there is only as much that we can do as newsrooms and journalists. The financial crime investigations need to be done in a professional way by a court monitored independent probe. But we need to remember, what is the bigger problem here? The problem is not that a company X today, or an individual Y says that, I want to contribute to India's politics, I want to contribute to the funding, so here's my money. The problem is when this money is being given either for gaining some big deal. Now, that deal could be given both at the level of the center and at the level of the states. States could also have projects that they can give to corporate companies, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's real estate. So there, the states can also be equally guilty. You have companies which are responsible for building the tunnel, the Silkyara tunnel, that collapsed. Till date, no accountability has been fixed for the deaths that have happened, or for that entire, in fact, dramatic sequence that we saw of workers getting stuck inside that tunnel. I mean, there were no death, luckily, mercifully for us. So, has there been a quid pro quo that has happened with these corporate companies? Because corporate companies are not getting into the philanthropic mode that they are going to give you money only because they want to build a good Indian political foundation. That is not happening. You have companies here who either have no income or who have very low income, but have actually managed to give multiple times more electoral bonds to the BJP or to some other parties. Where is that money coming from? And the larger question, as newsrooms continue to investigate, so many firms have now come up. And if you correlate the date when they were probed by agencies and the dates around which these bonds were purchased and encashed, it absolutely leads to serious questions whether they were under pressure from these investigation agencies. And on this point, we need to remember, Ruchir, that when it comes to all these financial crime units, investigation units, whether it's the income tax, the enforcement directorate, the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, these are federal agencies. These do not lie with states. So even if there are political parties in power in states, the misuse, the abuse of central agencies will happen from the central level. Therefore, it does look like prima facie, of course, and I would say that there is so much of strong pointing of evidence which has been dug up by newsrooms that the favors have been oddly stacked against the BJP, either through quid pro quo or through misuse of central agencies. If this is wrong, let the BJP, let the courts, and this is where the courts need to get it investigated. Because in a democracy, if one party is receiving a lion's share of funds and the other parties is getting accounts frozen for alleged IT violations that happened 3 decades ago, how do you call it a level playing field when you have prominent opposition leaders behind jail? How do they come out and campaign? I mean, we are used to seeing these things in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, with an opposition free election. We cannot be used to seeing this, and that's where people who say that if not Modi, who? If not BJP, who? I think is the question of the constitution, the founding principles versus the weakening of institutions.
I
That's what
think it's
people need
almost.
to talk about.
Sorry, I think that point you made, I think, Smita, I think it's almost by design, isn't it? It's like by targeting Kejriwal, by having all of these allegations and focusing on different opposition parties, you are removing them also from the
Yeah.
equation. But here's the analysis and my last question to close this topic out for today. The thing going through my brain is they've had an accidental own goal by putting SBI in the middle of this equation and having a formal mechanism to route money. We've now discovered all of these transactions and the corruption that went with it. Previously, all of that would have been done through either shell companies or through cash. So we would actually not have had the trails that we do now. And so, amazingly, now we have all this information on exactly
I
how
mean,
money moved.
but Ruchit, that's part of the problem, right? Like, this is the reason why the RBI, to start off with, had a problem with electoral bonds, because essentially,
Yeah,
what are these bonds? They're bearer bonds, right? Which is what they did not want, anonymity
yeah,
related with this money. But if you are issuing a bearer bond, then you need some bank, any bank, to stand up and say, "I'll collect it on your behalf," and then I'll,
right.
pass the good news on.
And that's why I keep using the term donation, because like a bond has a actual value in terms of return. Anyway,
But the
but
most
my
hilarious
question,
is Janata Dal United and Trinamool saying that people came and left the envelopes outside our doorsteps, and
yeah,
we went in
yeah.
cash. We don't know. Nobody leaves
So,
an envelope outside my door ever. I keep
well,
hoping, thinking nothing happens.
People do
but to
other
close
things
up,
with your phone, but not your door, Smita.
and some
I
free
know
money.
some bugs,
Things are left in your
some
phone, but not outside your
some
door.
some things called Pegasus.
But just on that, like, is this? I want to like bring it back to the question that we started with. Are these arrests an own goal? I mean, like, where do you both think we will land with these arrests?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like
See,
to hear Smita's thoughts on it, because, as she was saying, this is a very, he's a tall leader, he's also a leader who has not had the same sort of things stick to him. With Rahul Gandhi, it's been, well, first the narrative was this person is too foolish to run the country, and, there was the tag of Papu, and they, really trended that on social media. And then, of course, the bigger sticky wicket has been the family and its alleged ties with corruption and corrupt activities, right? The Gandhi family is corrupt. They've propagated an era of corruption when the Congress was in power. That's what we need to not do. Arvind Kejriwal is not that. For better or worse, he was part of the Anna Hazare movement, actually, when this whole call for going against corruption started. And that's not the image he's presented of himself. And as I said, this is someone who has now, for 2 terms, been elected back to power in Delhi, has been running the state. People are clearly happy with the kind of governance that they receive in the state of Delhi, which is why he won a second mandate, and he won it quite handsomely. So I'd be concerned. I know with the electoral bonds, a lot of people have had the reaction that you've correctly pointed out, Ruchir, and it's important to debate it. We're saying, well, what's the big deal? Everyone gives politicians money, and everyone gives politicians money around elections. So, usme kya hai? But on this one, I think it's going to be trickier. But Smita, what do you feel?
See, Kejriwal's style of politics has had its own share of problems, and I've had serious problems because he's a man who has combined, of course, who has had an agitational style of confrontational politics. He's done street politics. In the first term that he came in, which was a very short-lived term, he was actually going and sleeping on the footpaths to protest. So from protests, he moved towards governance, and his model has been one that is governance plus nationalism plus soft Hindutva, at times hard Hindutva. I mean, he is a man who has remained silent during the riots that happened in Delhi. His silence was tacit. He's a politician who has been doing a whole lot of fear mongering against refugees, especially Rohingyas, whether it was during recent violence in some parts of Delhi, or when the CA debate got initiated again. And he's making it sound like there will be millions of refugees who will be given citizenship, and that is horrific itself. So he has his own set of problematic politics. But the fact that he is doing something which in a way is also has similar, it resonates with the tones and shades of the BJP. And because he's Hindi speaking, so he's one of the very few regional parties that is still, that is carving out a base in Gujarat, maybe not winning exactly as many seats that he wants, but increasing its vote share. Or going and fighting in some other state, a state in Punjab, a frontline state, for a regional party to win was a huge victory. And that really got the BJP scored, that this party could go and not only defeat them in Delhi, but also go ahead and win in Punjab. So Kejriwal is a different opposition leader, different style of opposition leader. Since last night, since his arrest till now, we have seen, of course, some of the party faces, whether it's a Saurabh Bhardwaj, Atishi Manlini and all, they have taken to the streets. Some protesters have come out. I would hope that this kind of, we have seen the opposition coming together to slam the move. And Arvind Kejriwal again has actually remained quiet every time some other opposition leader has been raided by agencies. So that's another problem with him. He has the backing of the opposition India alliance today, but he normally plays it very safe or manipulates when somebody else from the opposition alliance is actually attacked by the ED or CBI. So I think he should learn his lessons from it. Now let's see whether he continues to be chief minister from, if he goes to jail, behind jail or not. Today we saw the application being withdrawn from Supreme Court and then being moved to Rouse Avenue. Uh, with all of this, of course, with Arvind Kejriwal, if the party is not able to consolidate ground movement, if people are not able to come out on the streets and protest, and if it fizzes away, you have Holi coming up, then it will be a lost opportunity. I think this is a chance for the opposition really to come down and do the sadak ki rajniti. If they don't, then it is a chance that fizzles away.
Thank you, Smita. And I think we will keep coming back to this because obviously the story is not over. But the theme of today's episode is up. So, Mitali, why don't you go to the next Aam Aadmi Party?
I was going to say, in fact, the theme of today's episode is Delhi, I think. And this is not news or new to anyone who's visited Delhi. We're talking about pollution. A Swiss-based air quality monitoring group put out a report around the world's most polluted cities, and Delhi was the most polluted capital city in the world in 2023. There's a bunch of other North Indian cities, of course, in that list. The most polluted is Begusarai, again in North India. And I think if you were to look at the list of countries, and not countries, but cities that have been released, a lion's share goes to Asia in terms of being the world's most polluted cities. This is, as I said, not new information to anyone who's lived in India. It's also not new in the sense that this is a problem that is almost decade long now, if not longer. Our very, very complicated relationship with pollution is not something that's just happened in 2023 with this, with this report coming out. It's been a lingering problem, and it started stretching beyond those crucial months. It started stretching beyond the finger pointing, where at one point, the position taken by the Delhi government was in Punjab when they set fire to their fields. That's when Delhi gets really polluted. But then we began to see that that phase of being intensely polluted actually stretched much beyond that. And it was also ironic that it was, as you said, Ruchir, the Aam Aadmi Party that was in power in Delhi and Punjab, and yet we were in the same situation come winter time. So let me start with you, Ruchir, on that one. How, or maybe I should ask, which way do you think solutions lie? I think, instead of being so negative, maybe the thing to think about is how does one fix this?
Um, intention. I mean, I think part of the problem is we haven't had serious conviction either at federal or state level to think about pollution. I think all of the narratives that usually come out are very soft, partly because, and this is a similar problem to climate change. So much of the conversation is when things die slowly, no one acts. And people start acting if, you have a climax like situation in a movie where the whole world is going to end and then everyone wants to have do something. It's really sad. I think the Aam Aadmi Party point is pertinent because for a while they could get away with the idea that the fires are being burnt through stubbles in Punjab and Haryana. Interestingly, Haryana, now when you talk to experts about air pollution, Haryana doesn't feature in the list of complaints. It's mostly Punjab. So there is a policy framework. Something has worked in Haryana that is not working in Punjab around the stubble fires or the farm produce fires. So something to be done there. One comment I will make is this is a very complex issue. There is a Oxford theory around wicked problems where every component has all these other implications. So this is about cars as much as it is about forest fires. It is about biogas burning and replacing fuel chulas in with people who cannot afford stoves, and so on. So there are so many different components that have to be addressed one by one. And all of those components stretch widely both to the NCR region and to Punjab and Haryana. So it requires a lot of coordination. And I feel like this is one of those things where you need a GST council like approach where different states get involved together and tackle different components of the pollution problem one by one. Obviously, we're zoomed in on Delhi right now. Pollution is an India-wide problem. I mean, you could have an India-wide council, not just focused on the north, but it requires intent. That is the main gap right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think till the last data that I'd been tracking, which was maybe around 2020, vehicular pollution was the biggest contributor to pollution, especially in Delhi. And that's the one I think a lot of experts have been pointing to, the point you're making, Ruchir, which is, an airshed approach. That you can't fix this problem in isolation just for Delhi. You have to think about how this is cutting across North India. The irony of it, Smita, is if you look at any one of these parties and their election manifesto, there is not a single mention of their approach to air pollution. Not one of these parties. And that's what I find, intensely sad. I know I've spoken to experts about this, and generally the refrain is, well, when people are struggling for things like access to food, access to water, other problems, air becomes almost secondary. And maybe there isn't that level of awareness around what toxic air can be doing to people. But why do you think that politicians or political parties have been able to sort of distance themselves from this air pollution problem, and it's not come back to them with public backlash?
Actually, when Aam Aadmi Party came into power, a large part of their manifesto and their action was around Delhi ki hawa saaf karenge,
It
on
was those
cleaning
cooling
Delhi
towers,
air.
right? Yeah, which
No, no.
I
I
got you.
mean, on paper, they had a huge plan.
Yeah,
Also, in manifesto, they had promised that we will deliver cleaning up the Yamuna, for instance, cleaning up the froth and the dirt, and getting into a clean action plan. They've called the CAP, the NCAP, and all, and but most of it remained on paper. I remember, remember a year last to last year, we were all in Australia for the Australian Youth Dialogue, the Emerging Leaders Retreat. And I'd actually spoken to Ruchir for my little news documentary, because how climate change had been the key issue in those Australian federal elections. So
yeah.
we saw it being a central talking point, be it the forest fires, be it the floods. People had actually voted on that issue. Politicians were being held accountable on that issue. It doesn't happen in India. And in India, you're right to point out to Ruchir also that farm waste is actually a smaller component. Uh, the industrial waste is way high. The industrial pollution is way high. Vehicular pollution is way high. Just a couple of months back, I was doing stories on stubble burning in Haryana, in Punjab. I went to some of the villages. There are so many multi-layered problems. For instance, even the CRMs, or the crop residual management machines, that's where a lot of these provisions under the farm laws that get contentious. A lot of the small income farmers don't want to buy a machine which will cost them 9 lakh 15 lakh rupees, and essentially be used for that 21-day period when they are shifting from paddy, for instance, to wheat. uh, in those periods, there is an entire nexus that is operating in states where you have a demand supply gap between these machines. They're not available in good numbers for those who can afford them, and they're not even available on rent or lease for the small farmers for them to use, which can actually help avoid stubble burning, for instance. So unless you don't get into the macro and the micro of these issues, but you only use it for a one-upmanship or a political blame game, you will not find solutions, which is our curse. I mean, Delhi, we have so gotten used to, and I'm so jealous of the two of you. Ruchit is in a city where all the memes are about the weather. The infrastructure, the traffic may be all crumbling, but the weather to acha hai is the city. You're also in London at the moment, which is like a nice weather. At least you're being able to, and I'm very happy for you, because we have all suffered being in Delhi when it comes to our lungs, when it comes to chest allergies, bronchial asthma, constant eye burning. Add to it the construction layers that are happening. Where I live now, I have at least 4 houses under construction in that same lane. And this is going to be now peak summers. And then you have air pollution. I'm dreading the scenario.
Yeah.
So, people, the poorer sections, yes, I think they are too busy earning their bread and butter, fighting their daily lives with that entire land resource conflict that you have in the world's most populous country with 1.4 billion people. But for political parties, unfortunately, the elections are still won on money, on muscle, on caste, on misinformation. And there is no accountability as far as that is being fixed on issues of climate change or the clean rights to have a clean water or safe drinking water for us.
Yeah. I'll tell you two funny anecdotes and then I want Ruchir's thoughts as well. One that a lot of the people from the EU who flew down for COP in Dubai, Ruchir, came back complaining, saying, the AQI levels are, they hit 99 and they hit 100. I thought I couldn't breathe. And in my head, I was laughing, thinking there are days when in Delhi it goes off, it can't read the meter anymore. 999 is the maximum. And after that, we don't know because the meter is set at that. So it was quite funny. And the other is that one of the beat reporters told me that when pollution was at its peak in Delhi, what the Aam Aadmi Party started doing was, they have these monitors set up in different parts in the city to basically gauge what the pollution levels are, and they started spraying water at the monitoring unit. Because that would then, I mean,
Totally the
it's
land
funny,
of the
it's so
Jigad.
sad. It's just so sad in order to bring the levels down. Um,
Someone was saving their job, basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jugad
So
technology at its worst.
part of what we do at the institute that I work on is a lot of research around audiences, and we did research around climate and climate news and audiences, and India was one of them. It was interesting when we posed a question about ho- how um, how soon do you think climate change is affecting your life? Most countries said it's affecting me now. Our respondents in India, the majority of our respondents said, I think climate change will affect me in 10 years. They didn't see an impact now. But when we asked them, do you think climate change is impacting your health? It was a huge 80% of the respondents said, yes, I think it's impacting my health, and I think it's impacting the health of my families. So even if we were to say, there isn't the level of education that there may be in other more developed countries, people have an understanding, as Smita is pointing out, of what climate is doing to health, and that impact is immediate. What can we do, Ruchir, to sort of to build this understanding amongst a wider population without making it gloom and doom, without making it that Bollywood climax, saying, maybe it won't get to one climactic moment, but this is super important, guys, and you need to pay attention to this.
Mitali, one of the reasons why this issue was on my mind is because I'd been talking about potential solutions about this with a friend of mine who's really motivated and worked up about the challenge. And I say that because I want to say that there are many people who are concerned about this, sometimes not on the climate change level, but at a localized level. And that's true for all climate change issues, I find. Climate change, when people talk about climate change, it becomes something like, oh, it is not my problem, it's something big, I don't know what to do about it. But when you talk about availability of fishing in Cochin, or you talk about air pollution in Delhi, or you talk about all of these localized issues, the sand sinking in Kutch and so on, then it becomes a real issue for people who live there. And I think that's the leap we have to make as a society, where instead of talking about climate change as a big picture problem, let's talk about how can we address the amount of car-based air pollution in Delhi, or talk about the fishing in Cochin and so on. Because ultimately, people react to what's affecting them today, and we have to find things that are caused by climate change that are affecting people today. The last comment I'll make on this is one of the things being toyed around at the moment with this friend of mine is, can we think about a large X prize for solving the air pollution crisis in Delhi? And there are people thinking about how we can improve the lives just at a wide macro level, because I think our jugaad will have to be at play to find some of the answers, given how complex this issue is, and how many sectors we will have to target to find a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'll just wind it down by saying that I think I speak for the three of us. No one here has any joy in discussing this. No one feels any pleasure sort of either criticizing governments or criticizing policies, because nobody wants to live in a situation where they can't breathe. I've had some really sort of traumatic episodes of driving my daughter to the ER because she's so sick with, a bronchial illness. And I know it's because of the pollution. That's pretty clear to all of us. And I think, from the solutions that you're pointing to, Ruchir, the big one really staring us in the face, and this is for all of North India, not just for Delhi, is public transport. I mean, uh, I don't own a car, and I don't see any need to, because there's enough reliable public transportation in order to ensure that I don't need to jump into a car and be that single driver in a single driving unit and carry sort of 8 tons of metal around town spewing smoke to get from one place to the other. We just have to do better to ensure that our citizens can travel in a dependable, efficient system. Um, as always, after two really heavy, heavy topics, we're going to
I just
lighten
want to
it
add
up.
one
Sorry,
final
yeah,
comment to
it's,
this. I mean, I just want to add one final comment here. I think,
yeah,
this is where the role of media becomes so important. But sadly, you do not have conversations across mainstream media. We are not talking about climate as an existential crisis. We only talk about climate in the very narrow prism and context of air pollution every time the air quality index starts to go above 500 around in and around Diwali. So
yeah,
September to November, December, you will have screaming, shrieking channels talking about air pollution. Then there is a deafening silence. Whatever happens is on the independent space, which doesn't get the same amount of reach. And there is no amount of climate reporting, substantial reporting happening in Hindi. Most of it is in English. So the
yeah,
people who are actually getting impacted, whether it's the apple groves of Kashmir, whether it is the changing snowfall patterns in the Himalayan region causing heavy losses for tourism as well as for hydroelectricity for water bodies, whether it's the micro or the larger issues, the point is of being able to simplify, explain, break down these topics. You don't have people. When I do these shows on my YouTube station, I have 200 views. When I do a show on something which is polarizing, I get 2 million and 2 lakh views. So, from the audience responsibility to how the media carries on these conversations, unfortunately, we have a long, long way to go when it comes to. But we have to find solutions. I remember in Shanghai, one of the way that they dealt with vehicular traffic was you could buy n number of cars, but the number of registration plates were actually being auctioned at such high rates that a person couldn't afford to buy. So even if you had three cars with you, you could only take out one car at a time. So unless we don't do these innovative policy thinking, if you tried odd even once didn't work, that cannot be a long term solution. It's like trying to treat cancer with migraine pills. You need to treat cancer with the treatment that is required for cancer, not with these short term pills and short term just what you call as jumlas.
no, absolutely. And I hope your friend does what he or she wants to, Ruchir. We're rooting for them. Okay, we're going to switch it now,
Yes.
as always, to better news or good news or uplifting news. This is our segment called "Have You Heard," where we share something interesting that one of us saw or read or heard. Richard, shall we start with you?
Yeah, I should look for other things other than technology. I keep going back to
Ah,
technology. This week for me was the video posted by Elon Musk about Neuralink. One of his businesses plants chips in your brain as a way of communicating for now with a computer. Long term vision is so that the chip can even help move the rest of your body by skipping the part of the spine that is damaged. So we saw a live demo of a person playing chess and talking about how they play this other game called Civilization through this chip that's planted in this person's mind who is paralyzed from their shoulders. I thought it was incredible. I enjoy technology because it goes to human ingenuity, and it's just so amazing to see people find solutions like this where someone who is disabled from the shoulders down is now able to communicate with a computer and have pleasure out of that. I thought that was really nice.
That's very cool. Smita.
Well, I actually had no clue that we were going to talk about this. And unfortunately, the last few days have only been dull, dreary, very dead, depressing news. I'm in the middle of it all. But if at all I can maybe, just share that I've loved watching this. And it's not a news story. It's really a docu-series on Messi. I love Messi. There's something about him that just makes me smile. There is a series on Apple, which is called Messi Meets America, which is a docu-series charting his journey since he joined the David Beckham's club and moved to America. And I hadn't followed his career trajectory since then, but it's a nicely made sort of a story that follows and how he goes through. So if anybody who's watched Ted Lasso, it's an amazing, nice sort of a drama series about this American football coach coming to teach, train, and coach a team in UK, a British team, and the kind of cultural differences and everything that it's a very uplifting story. So in a way, when you see this documentary of Messi, there is something very nice about the leadership stories, about the humility that what we call as goats, the greatest players of in the world, can actually bring to a club with very young players, be sort of so damn an inspiration for these younger players without really imposing themselves on them. So somehow it's a very nice sort of a series to watch. That's the only thing I could think of right now. I'm sorry about it.
It sounds fab. It sounds fab. I don't know if you saw this little video clip of a school teacher, in his country, trying to get her class to quieten down. So then, and they don't. So she finally says, "Okay, if you're a Messi fan, you will be quiet. If you're an Mbappe fan, you will
Oh.
keep talking." And the class goes, "Shush!" Like just complete silence.
Please
So
send me the video. I would love to
I
see
will, I
that.
will, I will. I thought that was really cool. I'm going to share this. This is a different index. It's not a pollution index, but was also released recently, which is the World Happiness Index, which is put out every year. And surprise, surprise, the Nordic countries take it away. So it's Finland that's at number one position. Denmark is at the second position, and a
I'm
couple of
always surprised. The weather is so depressing. I'm always surprised when I see the Nordic countries
You
high up.
know,
You,
so that's the thing. If you go through the details of it struck me because of the simplicity of it. Some of the things that I think they drew out from respondents was a lot of outdoor time, a lot of time with family and friends. And most importantly, these are countries where there is far more income, equality in income distribution. And I think, to my mind, that is, the it in terms of finding a happy space for an entire community. And I don't mean to do this to, sort of diss countries like India, which is at some 126 spot anyway.
Mitali, I was just going to say that this segment was supposed for you to uplift our spirit. You've again
No, no, it
reminded
is,
me
it
of
is.
the
I'll get there. I'll get
happiness
there.
index of the country where I am. And not to forget that the government is now, by the way, tasking its premier think tank for creating its own happiness index.
I will get there. What was surprising for me was that this year round, the United States has actually dropped out of top 20. So this is not about.
Yay!
Yeah, I mean, in the sense, this is not about, is this a developed country? Is this is
Yeah.
this a country in the West? It's such simple things. Do I get time with my family? Do I get to spend time in the outdoors with nature? Is everyone reasonably doing okay? I mean, they seem like such simple goals to aspire towards, but they contribute so much for a society's happiness. The
See, the
democracy
happiness
index, of
index
course,
for
I can't wait to see that. I'm sure that's
the
something
happiness
that
index of Americans is getting sucked every time they're thinking of November
or not. I don't know. Let's
and
see how
what
that
is going to
goes.
follow suit.
Very good, 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 good. Okay, folks, thank you very much for joining in, for listening in. Thank you, Smita. We really appreciate you dropping everything
Thank
in the
you.
middle of a very, very hectic schedule to talk to
Not
us
at all.
about elections and Kejriwal and everything. Ruchir, thanks as always. I am completely blank on our Twitter handle, so maybe what I will do is a round of everyone telling us their own Twitter handles and where to follow
Sure.
them. I'm at Mitali Live. Smita, you're at.
My Twitter is Smita_Sharma, but for Facebook, Insta, YouTube, it's Smita Sharma Journalist.
And
Ruchir?
I'm Ruchir_P. The podcast is at TID_podcast, YouTube at India Dialogue Podcast. Thank you all. Lovely seeing both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.